Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we have a video that might have been able to come out like 9 months ago or more, if not for the near year-long delay on Andorita's special edition of The Murdered Son. Alas, that was not meant to be, so here we are now in July of 2025. I apologize if this review is relatively rough. I literally read this collection about a year ago when I did the copy edit for it. And I should note it, I did do the copy edit for it, much like I did for Tales 3, but even so, my opinion is still my own. My thoughts are in no tangible sense affected by my work on it. Without further ado, let's jump into this review just as we normally do here on the Book Binge for the good. The greatest part of Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4, in my opinion, is that it expands and fills out aspects of Hadrian's tale in between books. Very many of the stories in this collection actually have more tangible placement in the universe, as opposed to previous collections where like half of the stories are like, kind of very solidly side stuff that you don't know when for sure a lot of it happens, but even then, it's not directly related to Hadrian or his storyline in any way, shape, or form. In the case of Tales 4, the Guns of Pharos occurs between Empire of Silence and Howling Dark. The Royal Game and Fangs of Awanos both occur between Ashes of Man and Disquiet Gods. And I believe the Cosmos does as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. These two stories, especially in reference to the Royal Game and Fangs of Awanos, are nigh on required reading, in my opinion, because these ones are directly related to Hadrian's tale in very tangible sense. In fact, one of them is Hadrian's POV, and the other one, Hadrian still occurs as a primary character. So, they're not technically required, but they're referenced in Disquiet Gods and Shadows Upon Time and feature characters to such a degree in those two books that particularly the beginning of Disquiet Gods is greatly enhanced by having read these two stories. Another great thing about Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4 is that the collection contains some of Christopher's funniest and most fun story yet. Not just one of the funniest and most fun story that he has written to date, in my personal opinion. The Prince of Man is the story associated with that, and that's also the one that was holding up this collection's release because that's the exclusive to, The Murdered Son from Andorita Books. So, take that as you will. Anyway, The Prince of Man is a non-canonical story in the vein of Pits of Imesh. It's one of those totally absurd and goofy stories that just plays on the knowledge that you have of the series that makes you question certain things, or rather, in this particular case, The Prince of Man kind of reads like a fan fiction in some sense, and is very entertaining as a result. I don't tend to laugh out loud or, actually audibly laugh whenever I'm reading, but The Prince of Man absolutely made me laugh, and that much I commend Christopher for. The collection also closes with the coolest and most unique story to ever appear in the series, and that is called The Cosmist. And that is something truly, truly special. I won't say anything specific about the story because I want you all to be able to experience it for yourselves. It is very good. No small number of folk call it Christopher's best short story, so that's not just me saying it's very good. That is a lot of people saying it is very good. The other good thing about Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4 is that it collects some stories that are otherwise difficult, if not, essentially impossible to obtain otherwise. For those of you unable or unwilling to get the Diamond Edition or the Andorita editions of the series, so Empire of Silence in the case of the Diamond Edition and The Murdered Son in the case of Andorita here, these bonus stories are in the collection. Guns of Pharos was included in the Diamond Edition of Empire of Silence. That is here. And The Prince of Man, as previously discussed, is in Andorita's The Murdered Son and is now in here. So you don't have to track down special editions of the series if you either can't afford it or are not interested in special editions for some reason. You can still read these extra side stories via Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4. In addition, you no longer will have to buy an edition of Grimdark Magazine issue number 34. That story, The Royal Game, is in here as previously stated, so you don't have to get that edition. You can just get this collection. You have that story. And finally, the exclusive short story that was previously published on Band.com the Things of Awanos is also in here. That story was free on band.com, so it's not like it was a financial burden to do that, but like actually reading it online or otherwise converting it to EPUB or something for you to be able to read it elsewhere would just be kind of a hassle, so you don't have to deal with that hassle anymore. The only story that is essentially new is the Cosmos. That's the only otherwise unreleased story from this collection, although it was made available on Patreon, I believe in June of 2025, so people were able to start reading it. Some people were able to start reading it a little bit early, but either way, those 5 stories are what are collected. So if you haven't, acquired those from other means, they are now all joined here together. You have all the short stories of the Sun Eater now. But I gotta say, there are a couple things that I wasn't as much a fan of in Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4. One of those is less of a bad thing in the case of Tales 4 directly, and more just that for me personally, it's kind of hard to top Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3. This collection is still good, all the stories in it are good, but I don't think any of the stories wowed me except for the Cosmos. So only that one of these 5 stories really wowed me in a way that all of the stories in Tales Volume 3 wowed me. And I know that might be a slightly unpopular opinion, but I know that Tales Volume 3 is generally the most popular of the collection so far, so maybe I won't end up being the only one to feel this way. I guess I should probably clarify, Prince of Man was really unique and great, so that one kind of wowed me in a different way, but it wasn't like the same effect that a lot of the Tales 3 stories had for me, so I guess it's just a little bit of comparison, and maybe that's unfair to Tales 4, but Tales 3 is kind of hard to top for me, so that's a detriment for Tales 4. It's also somewhat disappointing to a degree for there to only be 5 stories in this collection. In fairness, most of those stories are the longest short stories that Christopher has written for the Sun Eater at this point, and so in that way, I'm pretty sure Tales 4 is actually longer than even Tales 2 is, and it may even be longer than Tales 1. So it's not a short collection, it's just that there's technically less variety on account of there only being 5 stories, and on account of 3 of those stories being essentially directly related to Hadrian in the real-life timeline, and even a 4th story in there, Prince of Man, that sort of satirical, non-canonical one, still having to do with Hadrian. So it feels more closely tied to the main series than the other collections as a whole have tended to, and in that way, it kind of makes it feel less like a side thing, and that's part of why I enjoyed Tales of the Sun Eater, was for it being a side thing. But then there are other people who haven't bothered reading the Tales stuff because they don't want to read the side stuff. They just want to read things associated with Hadrian. In that case, Tales 4 might end up being your favorite one, especially since the 5th story, the Cosmos, that one doesn't have to do with Hadrian, but it's still directly related to the series in some sense that will actually impact your understanding or your viewing of certain characters in some ways. So in some sense, basically everything here has to do with the true series. Like I said, even the Prince of Man, the satirical story, it plays on your knowledge of the series to such a degree that it's just really fun. So even though it isn't technically it isn't true canon, it isn't something that actually happened in the universe, it's more like a fan fiction type of thing, it rewards your having read the series. So in that way, it's sort of directly related. So maybe that's something that I could have even included in the good, is that, yeah, all of these stories in some sense play off of the main series in a way that some people are really going to like it for that, even though for me it wasn't as special as a side thing as I think I got used to with the previous collections. Maybe that's just a me thing, I don't know, let me know down in the comments below. Finally, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about in the bad is that the timing of this release is pretty unfortunate given the delays on The Murdered Son. I think this collection last autumn would have been a really great release if that could have been possible. Even so, it's a good holdover for Shadows Upon Time, so, here a few months before that book comes out, you do have some new Sun Eater material, unless you're one of the diehards who has somehow read all the 5 stories already anyway, in which case it's literally just a collection of those 5 things, but if you haven't read some of these stories before, you have something to tide you over for the next handful of months. But for the ugly, let's just say the reading order kind of gets a bit scuffed with this entry to some degree, and that is because of where all the stories are placed. So, the Guns of Pharos occurs before anything in Tales Volume 3, maybe except for A Parable in Iron, but A Parable in Iron is also the least directly Sun Eater related story, I think, in any of these collections up to this point, so That one's kind of variable in the first place. The Royal Game and Fangs of Awanos occur between Ashes of Man and Disquiet Gods, but they also occur before the story titled Daughter of Swords from Tales Volume 3, and those three being read in that order, the Royal Game, Fangs of Awanos, and then Daughter of Swords, is pretty important from a timeline perspective. Like, that's the order that those stories occur in. And then the Acosmist I don't think we know for sure where it takes place. It might occur after Disquiet Gods technically, but it might just be after Ashes of Man. So it's just kind of somewhere in that late portion of the series. It's not important enough of a placement that like you have to read it in any given spot. But where these stories are placed in the timeline makes the reading order a bit weird. By this point, I have to clarify, I don't actually know what Christopher's recommended reading order for Tales 4 is, but I recommend reading Tales Volume 4, for obvious reasons, after Ashes of Man, but before Tales 3. And yes, I know, Tales Volume 4 before Tales Volume 3. That is what I think you should do. Trust me on this one. Like I said, the two stories that bridge Ashes of Man and Disquiet Gods and Tales 4 occur before the similar story that bridges that same gap from Tales 3, so that makes sense. And then the Guns of Pharos occurring much before anything else in Tales 3 also just kind of makes the balance of the timeline for Tales 4 just feel earlier in my brain. In that way, I think I recommend it there. If you want to hold off on The Acosmist and read that after Disquiet Gods, I think there are some people who might recommend doing that, and I think you could do that, but I don't think that's strictly necessary either. Maybe Christopher would recommend something a little bit different with Tales 4, but yeah, read Tales 4 before you read Tales Volume 3. As for the recommendation, I recommend Tales Volume 4 if only for The Acosmist. That story absolutely makes this collection worth reading, and if you're somebody who's missed out on any or all of the special editions of the series that have started to come out over the past couple of years, this collects some of those bonus stories as well. So in that sense, if you want to be able to read all of the extra Sun Eater content, yeah, pick up Tales 4. If you like Sun Eater enough and you want to read some of the side material, pick up Tales 4. There's definitely plenty of reason to pick some of these things up. But like I said, the primary reason why I think that you should pick up Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 4 is because of The Acosmist. If you're not already on the Patreon at the $10 or above tier, this is a must read, if only for that story. Also, you know, kind of consolidating some of the stories in between Ashes of Man and Disquiet Gods is pretty good, and I find those arguably necessary for the timeline. So in some sense, all of the stories in here, except for Prince of Man, I think are more or less necessary to be read to better understand part of Hadrian's journey. So that's kind of my thoughts, I guess. And I guess that makes this review in total. This might be my only regular review, at least, you know, in my previous regular review format for the rest of this month, I think, because maybe the rest of them are going to be something a little bit more scripted, we shall say, especially next week's video, where I'm going to be reviewing Shadows Upon Time and also announcing a giveaway. Like I said, that video is kind of special. It is episode 250 next week after all, so that's something that I'm looking forward to. We'll see how things go with the rest of the month, but I'm excited about my video schedule that I've got going on, and I hope to see you guys in the rest of them. Like I said, there's some pretty cool stuff going on, and a giveaway next week. That should incentivize you to check out that video. And kind of as I said at the beginning of this video, I'm sorry for it being a little bit rough. It's been like a year since I read this collection, and I haven't done a review in this format in a little while. It's been a couple months since I've recorded anything. It's been a few months since I've recorded anything in this format, quite frankly, so I'm just kind of rusty. Forgive me while I get back into the swing of things. But thank you once again for watching this video. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys next week for the Shadows Upon Time review and giveaway announcement.